Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Brooks. This is my 19-year-old daughter, Emily. This is our family story of our battle with BDD and how Emily learnt to control it. I'm very conscious that this is the last session of what's been a very long day for most of you. It's a fairly harrowing story, but it does have a happy ending, so please bear with me. Bit of a plot spoiler there. Emily was a quiet and content child, but with some confidence issues. She was popular with her friends who would compete for her attention, which would always cause Emily stress and anxiety. In junior school, some of the early signs of any problems were a fixation with her cousin and a desire to be like her. We would always make comparisons with Emily to her cousin as they were born just days apart. They'd be asked to stand back to back whenever they were together. The old grandparent trick where you have the white wall with a pencil. We've all done it. Unbeknown to us, Emily had started to use OCD rituals such as counting and tapping to try and control outcomes. She was also very sensitive to her peer group comments. And there were a couple of insensitive remarks made by friends that Emily was pale. This would cause us significant issues later on in Emily's life.
My move from a small village primary school to a large comprehensive did not go well for me. I felt very self-conscious and inadequate, comparing myself to others. I was not happy with my hair colour, having to wear glasses, and the way that I looked in my school uniform. Mum had to buy me more trousers, new shoes, and a new school bag. She also arranged for a contact lens appointment. Getting ready for school became a big issue, and I would frequently be late, as I would spend hours in the morning trying to get my hair right and checking my appearance. Every day, I would wake up feeling sick. Attending school became a problem, and it would cause stress in the house. Dad and I would frequently fall out, as he would insist I went, and I would lock myself in the bathroom crying. On many occasions, he would drive me to the school gates, and I would not be able to get out of his car. I would come home very stressed and angry. Eventually, at the end of my first year in high school, I was referred to CAMS to discuss my anxiety. Finally, having seen a picture of my cousin online looking thin, I decided I had to lose weight. I insisted on choosing my own food and started to count my calories, limiting myself to 400 a day. From my 13th birthday in November to the following February, I had lost enough weight to be rushed to hospital from a CAMS appointment. After a week in hospital, I was referred to an inpatient clinic for an eating disorder.
Emily spent 6 months recovering from her loss of weight. She felt safe in her surroundings there. She made some very good friends. It was a relief to me that she was in a place that could address her eating issues, but my wife was devastated to leave her there. We would visit every weekend, building up to half days out and the occasional overnight stay at home. This was difficult as we had a son at home studying for his GCSEs. However, we were fortunate that the unit was only an hour away from us by car. One family was flying in from the Isle of Man every single weekend and booking themselves into hotels. Emily was discharged 6 months later in August, having regained her weight and eating normally. I thought we were out of the woods and that we could move on. We'd been liaising with school to work out how to reintegrate Emily into classes and for her to catch up with Miss Work. Unfortunately, though, things did not go to plan.
Returning to school in September was a huge challenge for me. Everyone had got on with their lives, and I felt more isolated than ever. My parents had arranged for me to come in late and leave early to avoid the crowds. Teachers had been given instruction not to ask me any questions in class. However, I still felt vulnerable, and there was an expectation that I could just get on and do it. I felt out of control and exposed. I started to wear makeup, false eyelashes, and fake tan to school, which got me into a lot of trouble. There were more meetings to try and help me cope, but they just put me in the isolation unit, and I was not allowed out at break. I was conflicted, as I was uncomfortable in the company of my peers, but I desperately wanted to be seen as normal. I became fed up with life, and I started to rebel. There were arguments at home, and I frequently refused to attend CAMS. I did not see the point, as nobody seemed to understand what I was going through, and I became tired of talking to different people about how I was feeling. School attendance became infrequent, as the staff did not know how to treat me. I lived my life at home watching television and sleeping. I was obsessed with Googling plastic surgery procedures and beauty treatments. I would take lots of selfies and edit them to make them look acceptable to me. Any attempt to go out was frequently aborted after hours spent getting ready. If I did leave the house, I came back mentally and physically exhausted. I lost touch with my friends as I was unable to socialise.
I'd become acutely aware of Emily's vulnerability, especially when it came to be going to school or being forced to go to school when she didn't feel up to it. Her reintegration had not gone well, and we were having regular meetings with the head teacher and support staff to try and find a system that worked for her but also worked for them. At this stage, Emily was demanding various treatments that ranged from false eyelashes, eyebrow enhancement, hair dyeing, teeth whitening, teeth straightening, false tan. It seemed to be a never-ending and changing conveyor belt of needs, which when provided never gave any real satisfaction. Friends and family looking in suggested that Emily was controlling and spoilt. My wife, who had to book all the appointments, frequently got the verbal fallout when things did not go to plan. It was not until we had a better understanding of BDD that we realised that actually what we were doing was just fueling the illness. There were many arguments, and all the relationships in home were under strain. Emily had started to have violent outbursts that caused damage to the house. These were normally because I'd said something that she would feel was belittling, whilst trying to reason with her about her inhibitions. I would frequently ask how to parent a child with mental health issues. I wanted to discipline my daughter's poor behaviour, but I did not want to punish her for being ill. And deciphering those two was almost impossible. My escape was work, but my wife carried the stress with her daily and had to seek support for her own mental health. Family life became fragmented, and normal activities such as holidays, family gatherings were impossible as Emily could not cope with the social exposure. The illness was totally isolating for all members of the family. Emily continued to self-harm, and at low times would scour the house for pills, and we'd end up in A&E frequently. Throughout this period, CAMS were changing Emily's medication. When we did manage to attend sessions, they would see we were making little progress and would suggest a different drug. This would mean Emily being weaned off one and slowly increasing her dose of another. These periods were particularly challenging, and Emily was becoming more fragile. The real frustration here was that the first medication Emily was given was the one that she needed to be on, but they never gave it or prescribed it at an effective dose for her. To complicate life further, the Education Authority contacted us about Emily's poor school attendance record. With no medical diagnosis of her condition, they believed that there was no reason for her not to be in school and informed us that they were preparing a case to prosecute us. My overriding frustration at this point was a lack of diagnosis. Nobody had put a name to Emily's condition, and without a label, there was no way in which we could ever begin to find a cure. In desperation, and after hours of internet research, I wrote to CAMS offering my own conclusions. Unfortunately, the diagnosis I gave Emily put her on the autistic spectrum, for which they obviously immediately said, well, that's not the case. So they dismissed my diagnosis, but luckily for us, they came back with their own suggestion, having had the case reviewed by the consultant psychiatrist. I then found myself having to write to CAMS again to get them to give us a letter back to tell us exactly what was wrong with Emily. The letter that we received basically saved us from prosecution. But unfortunately, Emily's condition continued to get worse. So I find myself, I think after Christmas 2015, writing to CAMS asking for some more intervention, some more help. This was the actual email that I wrote. I wish to raise some concerns we have about Emily. She's been particularly withdrawn over Christmas, spending long periods by herself in her bedroom. She has not seen any of her friends and was even unable to spend Boxing Day at her grandparents' due to concerns she had about her looks. She cried all the way there and was able to get out of the car on arrival. We are finding that she's becoming more obsessed with her hair, eyelashes, eyebrows and skin colour. It is these issues that have contributed to her poor school attendance record last term. We have tried to placate her by spending money on cosmetic beauty treatments that she says she needs, but these are short-term fixes that clearly do not address the underlying issues. I believe that we need to try and confront some of this behaviour before Emily becomes totally housebound. I would welcome your thoughts or suggestions. We would be prepared to pay for targeted therapy from a specialist team if you thought it would help. We didn't know it at the time, but this was the first step on the road to Emily's recovery. Cam suggested that they could make a referral to the Maudsley Hospital in London that specialised in treating conditions such as Emily's. We'd not heard of it before, but it seemed like our only hope. We were referred in January 2016 and got our assessment day 4 months later in May. Emily was diagnosed with severe body dysmorphic disorder. A treatment plan was agreed which initially included 20 face-to-face weekly treatment sessions of CBT for BDD, and we were put on their waiting list. We started our weekly trips to London 6 months later in November 2016. Emily was 17 and we'd lived with body dysmorphia for 5 years.
I was reluctant to attend the assessment day at the Maudsley, as I only believed that my quality of life would improve with corrective surgery. Finally, after receiving a diagnosis, my parents still had to persuade me that getting treatment from a national specialist clinic was probably my last chance of receiving any help. At first, I was sceptical and didn't think that more CBT sessions would work. I was not looking forward to meeting another random person with little understanding of my situation. However, I had realised that I could not live the rest of my life without tackling this condition. I remember being told that the first step to recovery is understanding that you have an illness and that a cure is possible. From the very first session, I knew this was something different. I instantly bonded with my therapist, Angie, who actually understood my illness and could empathise with how I was feeling. I think it is really important to connect with your therapist and to fully engage with CBT treatment, which can be extremely challenging. The sessions moved from educating me about BDD to carrying out tasks which challenged my behaviours and beliefs. I became comfortable going to London because I felt invisible, but I was still struggling to carry out some of these exercises at home, where I felt under the microscope in a small town. To help with this, the Maudsley agreed to offer an intensive treatment package of therapy over 5 days in my own home. This helped me enormously, as I had to carry out tasks in my local environment which gave me the confidence to do normal activities like going into town on my own, something that I couldn't do before. The final sessions of treatment involved recognising triggers that may cause setbacks and looking at coping mechanisms. I was very concerned about my future because BDD had robbed me of my teenage years and I'd gained no formal qualifications. So we talked about how I could start rebuilding my life and the importance of having a sense of purpose and goals to achieve. During my post-treatment review in May this year, I was able to share my achievements with Angie. I set myself a target of passing my driving test and getting a job. I now drive around in my Mini Cooper called Woody, and I work at Next. I'm able to socialise with my friends and have holidayed in Corfu with my parents. I like to remind myself of how far I have come. For example, it used to take me 2 to 3 hours to get ready. It now takes me 20 minutes. I can now pop to the local shop without any makeup, whereas before I would not leave the house unless I was fully made up. I would sometimes be housebound for a month. Now I can go out most days, and I have not missed a day at work in 12 months. At times, I still experience some degree of body dissatisfaction. I have to remind myself of the coping strategies I was taught. I am now strong enough not to allow these concerns and negative thoughts to impact on my life. Finally, I feel comfortable in my own skin, something I never thought I'd be able to say.
As a family, we are immensely proud of Emily's perseverance and hard work during her treatment. The Maudsley Specialist Programme and expertise gave my daughter her life back. Since recovering from BDD, Emily has found the courage and confidence to share her experience by being involved in a Sky News programme highlighting the issues of BDD. She's participated in a research project looking at young people's experience of BDD and contributed to the book Appearance Anxiety, written by the Maudsley. As a parent, I look back and wonder if I could have done more. If I knew what I have learned now, could I have shortened the 6 years we spent living in the grasp of BDD? I cannot help but think of others who might be suffering because they have not received a diagnosis or cannot access specialist treatment. For this reason, sharing experience and educating communities locally is vitally important. We've been back to Emily's school with the Maudsley book and told them of our journey. Today, we've been given the opportunity to share our experience with you. In some way, if you've taken anything from our story, then the trip has been worthwhile. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening.